Hi everybody, welcome back to Daring Faith Session 5. I'll be your host today. I'm Rick Warren. Not really. But today we're going to talk about facing your fears with faith. And life, as we know it, is all about taking risk. You choose whether you go to college or you don't go to college, and if you don't, you got to choose a career, and if you choose a bad one, then you know how that could end up. And I guess if you choose the wrong college, some people end up like Joe and wear Duke shirts everywhere. But you also take risks, getting married. There's risk in everything, and our lives are full of risk every day. That's just the world we live in. You can't live without taking risk. So to think that we can live without taking risk, it's nonsense. And thinking about it, we often wonder, why has God placed us in a world where we have to take so many risks? And it's so that we lean on Him, we trust in Him, and that we have to live by faith. That is what saves us. So life is all about training us to have faith and to love how we're supposed to love. And all through Scripture, for those who've read it, God asked His people to take risk over and over again, to go places, to go battle with people, to walk through a sea. People were taking risks by standing up for their faith and had to sleep with lions and getting thrown in a burning fire. So obviously you can't go through our scriptures without taking risk and without having faith. And if it wasn't for risk takers, the 12 apostles and Jesus, we wouldn't be here today. So thankfully they showed us a good example of how to do it. So how do we do it? How do we take risk instead of caving into fear? Well, the Bible sets a clear set of instructions for us, and that's what we're going to cover today. And today we're going to talk about the 5 principles for taking risk. And the first one is the principle of information. Get the facts. Anything that requires faith is going to have an element of taking risk. But the Bible tells us that there's a right way and a wrong way. That's why we got to get the facts. God doesn't want you to make, stupid decisions or ignorant decisions. Doesn't want you to make rash decisions, just jumping into stuff, because that wouldn't be good. So you got to get the information you need first. Kind of, if I was just to stick a water bottle on a table with no lid on it, you would obviously at least smell it before you just went to drinking it, because there's a lot of clear liquids I could put in there. So you get the information. You don't just take, crazy risk, because that could end up painful, death, just stupid. In Proverbs 13:16, it tells us that every prudent man acts out of knowledge. In other words, wise people think before they act. And a Christian, that's definitely our lives, is thinking before we act, because we are always being watched. So don't make rash decisions, don't make uninformed decisions. Proverbs 23:23 out of the Living Bible says, get the facts at any price. The smart thing to do is always to get the facts. Talk to people that's been there, talk to people that's done it. You gotta, Rick Warren tells us, to talk to people who have done it so that we don't repeat their mistakes. And you guys know that I run a recovery program, so I use all the mistakes that I've made to try to help others from making the same ones. And there's no reason for, two or more of us to make the same stupid mistakes, because, we'll end up with a religion full of idiots, basically. So we learn from one another. And you can also read a book, go to lectures, talk to consultants. I run a tile business, and not to be prideful, but I do a lot of research on all the tile that I install and the different types of shower systems. So I would kind of like to put myself in, at least the top 2 or 3 around in doing these systems, because I've watched other guys do them without doing any research, and they just kind of wing putting them in, and then I'm the guy that gets to come back and fix them. So again, we get the information, we get the facts. It's not faith to jump in without any information. That's dumb. You get the information, that way you know how to make your decision. You look at fighters in the UFC or the boxing, or even football, baseball, they always watch tapes on their opponent. They don't just, I'm trained, so I'm gonna go in here and expect to win. No, they watch what their opponent is gonna do, and you get to see he may always go left or always go right. This guy always, might tap his knee if he's gonna run the ball. So you do your homework. And the facts may be scary, but there's nothing more frightening than ignorance. Again, if you don't know what you're getting into, pretty good chances you're gonna back out. When if you already know what's gonna happen, you may not start it, or you're already gonna be prepared for what's gonna come. So get the facts before you step out into faith. And the second principle that we're gonna talk about is the principle of evaluation. You count the cost, and we all know that Jesus said that, count the cost. So the first, you get the facts, then you count the cost. What will it cost in my time? What will it cost in money? What will it cost in relationships? And how much energy am I gonna have to put in it? And we see this in church, in ministries. A lot of times if you look at the ministry list, there might be 14 names on the ministry. But when you go to the events, you normally only see 3 or 4 people involved, because the people didn't count the cost. They just, thought it was a good idea and they wanted to serve on that ministry. So, and I'm guilty of that myself, so I'm not throwing stones at anybody. And so what do I have to stop doing in order for me to have enough resources to take the risk? You may have to stop some things. Me, I got a pretty busy schedule, so it's, oftentimes you got to cut things out of your life. When I got into church, when I found Christ, I counted the cost, and I come to realize that I couldn't hang out with my old friends and my old lifestyle, because if I did, then it wasn't going to work. So I had to count that cost. And Jesus, as much as I love and like my friends, Jesus is way better. And that goes for everybody out there. But Jesus tells us in Luke 14:28 through 31, he says, "Don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first getting estimates? Or what kind of king would dream of going to war without first sitting down with his counselors and discussing whether his army of 10,000 is strong enough to defeat the 20,000 men who are marching against him?" So if you're going to take a risk, you better know what it's going to cost, because you kind of get made fun of if you start something and back out. That's how the world works. They call you weak, they call you scared, they call you a quitter, a loser, and that's not what we are as Christians. We're winners. We are risk takers. We live by faith. We do the things the world tells us we can't do, just so that we can show them God can. So you must know what you've got. You must know what you're going to need, where you're going to need to go, and then you trust God intelligently. It's starting ministries, it's hard to start them by yourself, but when you go out and do the research and see what other ministries are out there that give you a hand, and what kind of, organizations that give you a hand, and it works a lot better. So it's always easier to get into something than it is to get out of something. Just remember that. It's like debt. It's really easy to get into debt. It's pretty hard to get out of it. And they hit with all them interest rates. And Rick Warren used the example of it's easy to get into a relationship, sometimes hard to get out of them. And I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about there. But it's just a law of life that it's easier to get into something than to get out. If you don't believe me, go jump in a pool. It's easy to jump in, and it's a little bit harder to get out. Or, throw a dog in a pool and watch how hard it is for him to get out. So we need to choose our commitments carefully. The fact is that we count the cost. And this is wise risk taking when we count the cost. Again, we don't make dumb risk. We don't make crazy risk. And every decision has a price tag, and you better attempt to know the price. Again, you don't want to start something and back out. I've thought about backing out of ministries, and who would suffer, me or them. So count the cost, because sometimes it's going to affect other people, not yourself. So just remember, people lean on us. And number 3, the third principle is the principle of preparation. We plan our steps. So we think about what we're going to do because God gave us a brain, and He expects us to use it. There's a saying out there nowadays that common sense isn't common anymore. Well, that shouldn't exist in the Christian church, because we should use it. We should always think about what we do. People are watching, and people's souls and eternity depend on us. So use your common sense, use the brain that He gave you. And Proverbs 14:15 says, a prudent man gives thought to his steps. And this is opposite of the foolish man, because a wise man does not charge into battle without a plan. And you've got to know where you're going. I'm one of the people that, I don't like making plans too much. I've always just winged it, but for most of my life I was on drugs and alcohol, so it was fine to wing it. But I've noticed now that I'm a Christian and a business owner and ministry leaders, that if I don't make a plan, I don't get too much done. I end up sitting around kind of lazy, thinking about what I should be doing, and I never actually do it. But the days that I actually make me a list out the night before, then I can get up the next day with a checklist, and I know exactly what I'm doing. I'll run my day and I'll check, and then I'll be lazy, because at that point I've done everything I needed to do. And so I need to get better at that with you guys. So anticipate problems that may come, and that's why we plan our steps. And what may I run into? If you know the problems you're going to run into, or at least some of them, you can plan ahead and know how to deal with them. That goes to military. If anybody's been in the military, they know that you plan for the worst. So if anything happens, you're ready for it. But at the same time, you've got to surrender all your plans to God. You can plan them, but you got to let God lead them. And Proverbs 16:9 says in the Living Bible, we should make plans counting on God to direct us. There's two parts here. There's man's part where we plan, but then there's God's part where He actually leads us in a way. And when we take time and slow down and actually listen to the Spirit, a lot of the times He'll stop us from doing things, or when we want to go right, He'll send us left. So we got to allow time for God to intervene and God to actually lead us. And prayer and preparation go together. As you pray, you plan, and as you plan, you pray, because we put God in everything. And if you try to run your life by your plans, then you're going to live your life. And that's kind of how you end up living your best life now, instead of your best life coming. So be careful of that. And we plan. You plan your life and you think about where you're going, but then you place the plans into God's hands. And we know that. Like I was just saying, you don't let you plan, because the flesh is strong and the flesh is going to do what it does. And like I was saying, some of us don't make plans. They say, I just live by faith. Well, Rick Warren says that's not faith. It's presumption. It's laziness. And I can definitely see where that is, because like I was saying, when I don't make plans, I'm a pretty lazy guy. Sorry, it's just how it is. I don't read, I don't study, I don't pray. I just sit around and watch TV and take naps and eat. So Scripture says we should make plans, counting on God to direct us. Now, the prepared life is an effective life. We get the facts, we count the cost, and we plan our steps. That's how we take a calculated risk. And that's what millionaires and billionaires do. They take calculated risk. That's how they've ended up where they are. Our world leaders, they've taken calculated risks to get where they are. They plan, they do nothing rash. So principle 4, it is the principle of declaration. This is where we announce our goal, or announce your goal. Now this is an important step, because it has to do with faith. You need to tell somebody what you're gonna do. You need to tell them your intentions. Make it public. It's kind of like our faith. You make a public statement that I believe in Jesus Christ. I'm gonna serve Jesus Christ. Well, now this is the risk I'm gonna take. It's funny, because back in my old days when I was, we'll just leave it at a heathen, I always wanted my own business. Didn't want to work for people. I wanted to be rich. But I was, a dreamer. Everything went to drugs, alcohol, and partying. But then I found Jesus Christ and I got into church. Well, Satan stepped in with the fear, and that's why this is a good lesson for me. And ever since I've been in church, I haven't wanted to work for myself. I've always had the fear of not making it, or the fear of putting a business before God and just completely shutting God out. And then I got to thinking about it, because God allowed me to work with somebody that I wasn't happy. Nothing wrong with him. It's just I really wasn't happy where I was. I knew that I could do better, and I knew I could do it all myself. And I thought about it for a while. And then finally I started telling people, I think I'm gonna go on my own. And then I couldn't stop it, because every time I would see people, they were, so how's your business coming? And it's hard to tell somebody like, well, yeah, I gave up on that dream, because they don't nobody like to be a quitter. So thankfully, putting it out loud has helped me. And so it's important, because publicly stated goals are statements of faith. They're goals for our life, our family, our finances, our ministries. They show that we're dependent on God when we start saying it out. I would like to do it, and then I'm going to plan it. I'm going to count the cost, and then I'm going to leave it in God's hands. And if it's His will, then He's out there. And I prayed not to be rich, but just to have enough work to pay my bills, but leave me with enough time to serve Him. And it has worked out perfectly. My bank account has not gone backwards, hasn't gone up very much, but I've had plenty of time to serve Him, especially if I get the laziness out of my life and plan my goals. So, and this is how we do it. In James 4:15 it says, "What you should say is this: if the Lord is willing, we will live and do this or that." And I'm sure we all can look at things in our lives and say, if the Lord's willing, we're going to do it. And, you know, I'm a prime example. I'm a ex-drug addict, alcoholic, party boy. I'm a convicted felon. And here I am teaching a lesson. I run a recovery program. It's when God's behind you, man, you can't stop it. So if we follow these principles, God will do great things through us. So God always has the right to change your goals, so remember that. But God does not eliminate the need for us to state the goal out loud. Your goals may change. God, you know, may start something different with you. I had the intentions to be a Bikers for Christ. And instead of being a Bikers for Christ, now our church has a chapter of the Faith Riders. So God changed my goal. I put it in his hands, and now we got our own ministry, and it's pretty good. So when you announce your goal, it builds your faith and holds you accountable to other people. It won't let you back out. Again, we don't want to be quitters. We don't want to be losers. So tell people. And when you tell somebody your goal, they can pray for you. It's always better to have multiple people praying for you than just you. So these 4 principles: the principle of information, we get the facts. Evaluation, we count the cost. The preparation is we plan our steps. And then the declaration is we announce it. And they lead you up to number 5. And number 5, that's the big one. And we're going to talk about this one for just a little bit. And principle 5 is the initiation. Let go and leap out. The hardest part of anything is taking the first step. So letting go of old and grabbing onto the new, this principle is absolutely critical in facing our fears in our life. Again, the hardest part is the first step. We love to talk ourselves out of everything. It's what we do. Most of the time we can accomplish what it is we're wanting to do. We already know we can. That's why we have the ideas to do it. So just take that first step. And a great example that Rick Warren uses is a trapeze artist. It swings, and they're just far enough apart that the trapeze artist has to completely let go of the one he's on to get the other one. And that's how we have to do with our risk in our lives. We have to completely just let go of whatever it is. With my criminal record and everything in my past, I have the perfect opportunity to just use excuse after excuse after excuse of why I can't do things and why I can't serve in the church and why I can't run ministries. And God just kind of laughed at all of that. God said he's bigger than me. So here I am. And the worst part is I got to talk about it. So daring faith is letting go and leaping out simultaneously. And it says, have you ever experienced this? And I'm sure we have. Have you ever quit a job before you had another one? Have you, this guy said he would hire you, so you go ahead and quit your first one, and it's like, man, but I know God's got me. So we do it a lot. How about moving? You hear about these kids graduating high school and get a little bit of money from the parents and take the money they got saved up and they just take off somewhere. That's faith. It's a risk. And some make it, some don't. I would say most of them that don't have God. So we'll leave that at that. And when God tests our faith, you may feel like you're 100 feet in the air with no net below you. But if you let go, there's a chance of moving forward. If you hold on to that trapeze, you're going right back to the beginning. But the sad part is it ain't going to have enough momentum to get you back to the stand that you were standing on. So you're slowly going to slow down. And then you're just going to be hanging there in the middle where you don't want to be. You're not where you were, and you're not where you need to be, so it's just going to suck. And the only way to move forward is to let go. Now remember, the Israelites, they got to the Red Sea and they got stuck. So they had to let go and let God. And, you know, there was mountains on one side, there was a sea in front of them, there was an army behind them. And instead of displaying their faith, they responded in fear. You know, they complained to Moses that they should have remained in Egypt. And that's a lot of what we do too. So how quickly people can forget the bondage of slavery. How quickly we forget what it's like to live in fear. You get comfortable in places, so you don't want to better yourself because you're so comfortable. When you try to step out, that fear hits you and you go back. It's no, I'm scared. That's what took me so long to start my business. I just knew I was going to fail. They're not going to want to hire me because of my criminal record. I'm not going to have enough work, and I don't have enough money saved up to last. So I'm just going to, at that point, I'm going to be broke, can't pay my bills, and I don't have a job. And when I finally took a step, none of that has happened. So God is great. And so, but we need to remember at the first sign of a problem after we've released, that we don't go back. Keep moving. Because again, if you try to go back, you may end up hanging like the trapeze artist. If the Israelites would have went back, there's no telling how bad the Pharaoh would have treated them. So fear causes us to turn around and go back, even when what you want, or even when what you came from was terrible. You know, we get comfortable in bad situations. You see it a lot in relationships. People are in bad relationships, but they're so comfortable in it that they just stay. They're scared to try to better themselves, so they stay in bad situations. We see that everywhere. We see it with our parents. We see it with our daughters and sons. It's fear. So let's apply this principle to today. Why do we stay in unhealthy situations? Why continue self-defeating habits when we know they're destroying our lives? Because we're comfortable. It might be bad, but it's comfortable. It's predictable. I know what's coming. I've learned how to handle it. I had a bad childhood, so I stayed high and drunk. I was comfortable. I didn't want to move forward. I didn't want to sober up because I was going to have to face reality, and I just did not want to do it. I was scared to do it, and my excuse was always I can't get sober because if I'm sober, I think too much, and I dwell on the past, and I think about my problems, and I'm just too stressed out. Can't pay my bills and this and that. Well, it's funny, I got clean and sober, and my bills ain't behind. I've kind of faced my past and forgave everybody that had a part in it, and I'm a pretty joyful guy now. Might not be the best guy, but I'm not the angry guy I was. So it's moving forward. So what's the solution for facing our fears, and how do you get the courage to face your fear? And that is Psalm 56 verse 3. When I am afraid, I will put my confidence in you. Yes, I will trust the promises of God. Scripture helped me get over mine. I read you can't be forgiven if you don't forgive. You know, it's just put your burdens on Christ. Let him carry them, you know, and I got over mine, and it allowed me to see that, you know, people were dealing with their own hurts, habits, and hang-ups and couldn't get over them, and it bled over into my life, and now I don't want mine to bleed over into somebody else's life. So get out of your fear, because there's no telling how many people you can help stepping out of your fear, because people are paralyzed in theirs. So when you get the courage to face your fears, you put your confidence in God. It's not that you're not afraid, because you will be afraid, but you can have the confidence and fear at the same time. You can have God's confidence. And A courageous person can be scared to death, but he goes ahead and does it anyway. You think of soldiers. All these guys has got Medal of Honors. They're not that brave. I mean, they're brave, but they were scared to death. But hey, they stepped out of their foxholes and did something amazing and got a Medal of Honor. I mean, the guy's name, Audie Murphy. You know that guy was afraid, but he didn't let his fear override what he was, and he's like the most distinguished soldier ever alive. So courage is what we need, and courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving ahead in spite of your fear. Again, like soldiers, like fighters. Anybody that's ever been in a fight, you know that you're scared before. I mean, it's going to happen, so you go ahead and do it. And, you know, finally, you have a loving Heavenly Father who wants to help us with our fears. So when we come to this step, we leap out, but you have to look up. You got to look up for God's confidence. And confidence does not come from below, from the people around you, or even within you. The confidence you need comes from God. And I'm not sure the version of this, but the Philippians 14, we all know, it says, I have the strength to face all conditions by the power that Christ gives me. All things are possible when we put our trust in Him. So all conditions, everything I'm going to face today, tomorrow, and forever, we face it with Christ's power. And our memory verse this week is about God's power. So let's read that together, and it'll be on your screen. Ephesians 3:20. With God's power working in us, God can do much, much more than anything we can ask or imagine. Ephesians 3:20. So memorize that verse this week. If you start to get discouraged, depressed, overwhelmed, afraid, just remind yourself of that. And to read it again so that we don't forget it, it's Ephesians 3:20. With God's power working in us, God can do much, much more than anything we can ask or imagine. Ephesians 3:20. I can promise you that is a true verse. Never thought I'd be where I am right now. And anybody that knows me would never thought I'd be right here now. So to wrap things up, if you don't get anything else I've said, I want you to get this, and I want you to write this down. The key to daring faith is move against your fear. You don't have to act, or you have to act. Do the thing you fear the most. That's what it means to live by faith. And there's a quote I read the other day. I think it was Jim Morrison from The Doors. And he said, face your biggest fear, and that's when you find freedom. So he had a bunch of other weird ones, but that one made sense. But daring faith is when you feel the fear, but you do it anyway. And God didn't take the Israelites around the Red Sea. He didn't build a bridge over it. He took them through it. In Exodus 14:15, then the Lord said to Moses, quit praying and get the people moving. Forward, march. That's what we get stuck in, is praying. A lot of people pray to death. Lord, help me with this. Lord, do that. Lord, do this. Lord, bring this in my life. But we never help Him. And can you imagine God saying, quit praying, get moving? Well, He does. He told the Israelites that. It's one of the things we teach in recovery. Is yes, we pray for recovery. But you put in the action. You put in the work. He's not just going to take it from you, because that would be taking your free will. So you have to put in the work. And there comes a time in our life when you got to stop talking about things, we got to stop praying about things, and we got to get to doing things. People often use prayer as a reason for procrastinating. Some of you need to quit praying. Some of you need to get moving. If you've been praying about the same thing for a long time, you may want to take that step and stop praying. God's already given you the answer. You just need to take 2 or 3 steps to get to it. So what's your personal Red Sea? What's God telling you to do that you're scared to death of doing? It should be in everybody's mind. I know mine, and I'm scared to death to do it. And I see him bringing me to it more and more each day. So, what is it to keep saying one of these days? Or what is it that you keep saying one of these days? Stop saying that. Have you realized that one of these days has turned into none of these days? So whatever's keeping you in bondage, whatever you are afraid to move against, that's your Red Sea. Now God's saying it's time to move against your fear. And it's time to get across your Red Sea. It's time to leap out. It's time to let go and let God. And that's where daring faith begins.